Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Lempitsky. I'm the founder of Cinemersive Labs, a startup based in Edinburgh. We're working on new technologies for creating 6 degrees of freedom content for XR. Today, I will discuss and remind what the 6DoF content is, why is it needed for XR, and we work on making 6DoF photographs and videos ubiquitous in XR. And in this presentation, I will argue that this is both worthwhile and possible in the immediate future. But before talking about future, let me start with the deep past and briefly discuss how it all started with the immersive content in XR. It all, of course, depends on how you define what immersive content is. But arguably, the first immersive experience came in the form of stereoscopes in the late 19th century. Interestingly, by some accounts, the first stereoscopes were invited in Edinburgh, also where our startup is based. The very first stereoscopes used drawings, but very quickly photographers figured out that the experiences are far more interesting, compelling if you use photographs. And such stereo photographs viewed in stereoscopes became quite popular. So each series photograph is naturally just a pair of regular photographs captured from 2 adjacent viewpoints, and then exposed through the stereoscope. So stereoscopes were about static images. In one of the first immersive video experiences was the Sensorama system.
Victor, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have a video issue here. We don't see those slides yet.
Okay, where should I go back to the?
Yeah, this works. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And what about now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of the first video experiences was the Sensorama system, and in this system, a person would be seated in a rather fixed manner in front of a stereoscope, and they will be shown a stereo video augmented with stereo sound, and also even with the sound with the smell of the place, and even the wind will be modeled. And I think their main experience was riding a motorcycle. And this was a very advanced and a very immersive system because of this multimodality. But for today's purposes, let's focus on the visual part. And the visual experience here was a stereo video recorded again from 2 adjacent points with a stereo camera. And the experience setup compels the user to remain fully stationary. Back to our time, perhaps the main immersive video format are panoramic videos still. Usually they're captured with inexpensive camera systems and are streams of panoramas corresponding to a single point of view. And there are several problems with this format. Well, first, it does not produce a binocular stereo effect, which limits the realism and the sense of immersion. Because the binocular disparity for all objects is 0, part of your brain reports that the objects should be very far away. And then given the large distance and a certain angular size, the brain infers that objects are bigger than they are in real life. So things look unrealistically large in this format. And then the second issue, most importantly, is that these videos capture the world in 3 degrees of freedom. What I mean is that when you watch this video and you move your head even slightly, there is no parallax effect associated with this motion, because the 3 translational degrees of freedom are ignored in this format, and only 3 rotational degrees of freedom are modeled, right? So this leads to the conflict between the 3D model formed in your brain and the anticipation that this model should move in a certain way. So, and this becomes a conflict between your visual system that does not observe any motion parallax and your vestibular system that reports that your head is in motion. And this conflict results in nausea or discomfort in many people, and the problem is particularly acute in the immersive larger field of view case. Another popular format is stereo video, which has a similar format to what was used inside Sensorama. These videos are recorded for 2 points of view corresponding to 2 different eyes. And They therefore provide a more realistic, more three-dimensional experience that supports binocular stereo vision and show effects in correct scale, at least when the user is looking approximately forward. However, because the world appears more realistic and more 3D, this actually makes the conflict between the vestibular system and the visual system even stronger. This is because this format still does not allow to simulate any motion parallax effect and does not handle the translational degrees of freedom properly. Okay, finally, it's worth to mention that there is a more high-end version of the stereo 3 degrees of freedom videos that are usually recorded with rings of cameras, and the left and the right channels in this format no longer correspond to some fixed points, and this allows to handle, for example, 360 degrees experiences. But this is still a 3 degrees of freedom format that does not properly simulates the motion parallax, and it shares many of the problems with the simpler 2.3 degrees of freedom stereo videos. Okay, and now let me step back again to the 60s and the famous sort of Damocles system from the Sutherland's group in the University of Utah. There, in that system, they demonstrated a proper augmented reality sort of setup that tracked the user head in full 6 degrees of freedom, that is 3 degrees for rotation and 3 degrees for translation. And for that, they used some advanced electromechanical tracking. Now, as you can hopefully see in this video, so the video is quite blurry, it's an old video, but using this real-time tracked position, they displayed a synthesized content rendered using computer graphics. In this case, this is just a cube wireframe, which you can probably barely see in this video. It appears in the middle of the video at some point. So this is very primitive graphics because it was 60s, but importantly, the location of the cube in the world was consistent with the location of the head and the motion of the head. So this is a proper 6 degrees of freedom experience. Now, to sum up, already in the end of 60s, there were 2 types of content in XR. First, there was a reality captured 3 degrees of freedom content, mono stereo. And then there was a second class, full 3D, 6 degrees of freedom content created using computer graphics. Okay. For a typical XR consumer today, the situation has actually not changed that much. So the vast majority of XR experiences fall into one of the 2 categories, either reality captured 3DoF or computer graphics-based 6DoF. Of course, both classes got much, much better. And here you see some of the most compelling, the most impressive representatives of both classes. But the 2 dominant classes remain. And the point of my talk is that now we should be able to move on, and that now we possess technology to create 6 degrees of freedom and reality captured content easier than before and better than before. Now, before we proceed, let us discuss whether people really care if the content is in 6DoF or 3DoF. I will put forward 2 arguments why they care. One is this study where the authors showed the same synthetic content to users in different format and asked the users to evaluate within each pair which format they prefer. There were the 3DoF format, the leftmost 2 columns, the 5DoF format, these are middle 2 columns, and for the sake of time, let's just skip it. The full-fledged 6 degrees of freedom format. And within each format, they showed it in mono, same signal was sent to both eyes, or in stereo. And the numbers in the table are the average preference scores on a -3 to +3 scale. So +3 means strongly prefer, -3 means like the opposite. And what we see here is a very strong preference towards 6DoF stereo format. Interestingly, users slightly prefer the monocular 3DoF format to stereo 3DoF format. I mean, this 0 0.08 preference score here. I'm not sure if this is statistically significant, but if so, this alludes to the fact that in the 3DoF case, stereo brings more realism, but also more discomfort. Okay, so there is this user study, which is corroborated by a lot of anecdotal evidence. Like we show our demos in 6DoF and 3DoF formats, and also see people noticing the difference and preferring 6DoF. So there is this user study-based argument. And my second argument is admittedly more speculative. If we look at which content people prefer to experience outside of the XR domain, then we see that both graphics-based content, computer games, and reality-captured content, such as YouTube, Netflix, etc., are popular. And by most measurements, reality-captured content is actually more popular than synthetic. So informally speaking, there are more video watchers than gamers in the world. But if you look at XR, the situation is very different. Computer games dominate, especially if you disregard the porn industry. So there should be some XR-specific factor or factors that explain this bias towards synthetic content in XR. And I think that at least one of these factors is the discomfort associated with the 3 degrees of freedom reality-captured content. And if I'm right, the move towards 6DoF reality-captured content should be a really big deal for XR. Okay, now, as I said, there are already some very interesting examples of reality-captured 6DoF content. Obviously, there is a well-established volumetric studio technology where some action is being captured either in studio or in specially prepared location, like even a stadium like we saw today. And this is all captured by a large number of synchronized cameras, and then computer vision methods based on this ample input produce dynamic, fully three-dimensional videos that is a 6 degrees of freedom content. These videos can indeed be of very high quality, but obviously the need for this large number of synchronized cameras is a limitation to what kind of experiences one can capture. Perhaps my personal favorite 6DoF experience is this app. Here, the creators of the app model nature landmarks and locations using an off-the-shelf photogrammetric software. For that, they need to take a large number of photographs of a certain location and then use structure and motion to establish camera parameters, which effectively brings the authors again to this heavily multi-camera setting, right? And it works well for a certain class of static scenes like mountains and rocks that are devoid of vegetation. And these are locations that they have in the app. And then they can add some dynamic elements using computer graphics, such as synthetic models of small plants with some undulations, flying birds, and they replace sky textures with more dramatic textures. And it looks fantastic, and it is completely nausea-free, discomfort-free, and is really worth trying. But again, the scope of what you can capture in this way is limited to a certain class of scenes. And obviously, like with almost every aspect of our lives these days, AI allows us now to go, to make the next step and to facilitate easier and better capture of 6DoF content. There is a lot of going on in the computer vision community around 3D reconstruction, and the NERF story that John has just covered is one of the biggest stories there. Basically, many research groups investigate how to apply neural networks to the task of photorealistic 3D reconstruction, and they consider all kinds of combinations of factors, like how many views of an object or a scene we have as an input, like how do we get the training data, and what is our domain? Is it limited, like, say, to humans, or is it like general scenes, all kinds of scenes? What's important is that in many of these works, the authors consider a rather limited set of views, typically far fewer than are available in the volumetric studio. So AI tools allow to reduce the number of cameras rather dramatically and make 6DoF content acquisition, 3D content acquisition easier. When designing such AI-based 3D reconstruction systems, an important factor is the choice of 3D scene representation, again, like was highlighted in the previous talk. There are like many choices. None of them is better than others. All they have their pros and cons. I'll just focus on one representation today, and this is the layered mesh representation. Again, this representation has a long history that actually goes back to the era before like computing. It was used in animation at least since 1930s when Walt Disney Studios used scene representation based on several semi-transparent films to create motion with parallax effect in cartoons. And this representation is actively being developed in the computer vision community these days. Like in this SIGGRAPH 18 paper, the authors showed that this representation is very well suited for neural networks. They designed a neural network that took a pair of photographs as an input and inferred a layered representation of the scene that can be used to create photorealistic views from adjacent viewpoints. And the key strength of this representation is that it is very well supported by the graphics hardware. It is very fast to render. And at the same time, it provides good photorealism in the vicinity of the input views. Like here is one example from their paper, how a scene is decomposed by the network into a set of planar layers with semi-transparent textures. It's kind of midway between the mesh world and the volumetric representation, maybe closer to volumetric representation, actually. And on the right, you can see the rendered view for a novel viewpoint, which looks very realistic, right? And that work had a lot of follow-ups, like this paper, where they showed that given few dozens of scene views, it is possible to infer a high-fidelity layered planar representation with a rather plausible view-dependent effect being modeled. And then, of course, there was this landmark paper and an associated demo that showed how to expand layered representations to 6DoF VR videos. Here, the authors used a rig with 40+ cameras, but made this rig reasonably transportable so that they can capture some nice, interesting outdoor locations. And they introduced many innovations in their work and released an associated VR demo. And the demo supports the viewing volume of roughly the same span as their rig, which is about 40 centimeters, I think, in diameter. And this is more than enough for a comfortable seated VR experience where you can freely rotate your head, move it slightly, and so on. And seeing their demo really made me want to push the 6DoF VR video story further and to focus my career on this goal. And this eventually led me to find a strong team of people which also felt excited by 6DoF content and to start eventually to start the Cinemersive Labs company. Okay. So at Cinemersive Labs, we work on two different acquisition setups. First, we have designed our own portable 5-camera rig. It has only 5 synchronized cameras, so rather small number compared to many other works there. It can be operated from a tripod, or it can be fully mobile. We can walk with this rig around and take videos with it. And the second acquisition setup that we consider for getting 6DoF content is a smartphone. Okay. Now, most of us work on algorithms and machine learning, and it means that a lot of what we do revolves around data, including the training data set. So we build and grow this data set by simply working with the camera rig in different locations around the world. We currently have collected around like 120 terabytes of raw footage, which is about 50 million frames or 280 hours. So each frame in this case is a quintuplet of geometrically calibrated and synchronized 4K resolution frames. And this is really a great data set to work with. Geographically, the rig traveled over a dozen countries, spanning from Armenia, where we started the company, all the way to Hawaii. And what you see in this slide is a random sample from our data set. It has indoor, but mostly outdoor frames, all seasons, all kind of lighting, and so on. And working with this huge data set allows us to do a lot, but maintaining and growing it is obviously also a big effort. Now, having this data set allows us to design and train big neural networks that takes for example, streams of synchronized views acquired from the same rig and turn them into 3D models. So we also use layered representation. We can do it for videos, which requires a lot of extra effort compared to still images, like designing a codec, ensuring that rendering and decoding can run simultaneously on a standalone headset like Quest 2, ensuring that the video playback is reasonably smooth, which requires some tracking algorithms to be used. So under the hood, we have some big pipeline built around neural networks. The input to these networks are pentuplets of frames captured by the rig, and the output are 3D models. And so streams of, to be more precise, streams of 3D models. So every frame in this video is a 3D model. And these videos are actually, that you see here, are actual real-time screencasts from Quest 2. So everything runs on Quest 2. There are no external cloud or desktop GPUs involved. And the rendering and the content are at full Quest 2 screen resolution. Quest 3 is also supported, like hopefully some of you experienced in the demo session. Yeah, here we put the playback on pause from time to time just to show the parallax effect. But otherwise, videos run smoothly, right? Okay, and in case you haven't seen the demo today, these demos are also available on AppLab. The link is on our website, and as long as you have Quest 2 or 3, you can try it. We also have a separate app which shows not videos but photographs, and most of them were just picked from our data set, but we also solicited some from photographers, which were actually delighted to work with our rig and see the result. It was a very pleasant experience to work with them. I have to say that actually, when you watch static scenes, that stimulates somehow you to move the head more. So it seems that the advantage of having full 6 degrees of freedom handout gets bigger for static photographs compared to videos. Yeah, and we have an app with something like 200 6DoF photographs from around the world, again, available on AppLab for you to try. These days, we focus on the next frontier, which is capturing 6DoF content with a smartphone. Now, there are some very exciting prototypes, companies, research groups working on the scenario when you find a static scene, you take a smartphone video of the scene from various directions, and then you turn this smartphone video into a single static 3D model using approaches like NERF. So this is very exciting, produces very great results, but this is not what we do. We think that too many interesting things that are worth capturing are highly non-static, and you cannot easily capture such scenes in a video that can be turned into a static 3D model in a robust way. So to handle dynamic scenes, dynamic world, we really want to be able to capture 3D from a single viewpoint, for example, using a single smartphone photograph using CAD. And we train, again, big neural networks on our data set and design pipelines that can do such conversion. These are screencasts of some results. So as I said, each of these 3D models were created from a single photograph. In VR, especially in VR, you still see quite a lot of artifacts, I would say. Obviously, acquiring 3D content from a single photo is hard. But the plan is that in a matter of weeks, we should release a demo with interesting 6DoF photographs from around the world acquired from single smartphone photographs. And eventually we will get to the user-generated scenario where you will be able to upload your photographs and turn them into 6DoF experiences and enjoy and relive them in your standalone headset. One big factor for us is how much better the ultra-wide cameras of flagship smartphones got over the last several years. So high-quality ultra-wide photography is very accessible now. And even a single smartphone ultra-wide photo captures a large enough field of view for an immersive experience, as long as you can transform it, lift it into 3D successfully. And this is what we do. Okay. So you see like lots of photographs from Edinburgh, but also from around the world. Again, we mostly do outdoor, but indoor scenes actually also supported. Okay, and we do this for photographs, but we can also generalize and extend these methods to videos. We're really in early stages here, but here is an example of such conversion from a single iPhone video. Again, this is just a screencast from Quest 2, and all rendering and decoding runs on device. And again, we stop this video once in a while just to show the parallax, pause it, but then the video plays smoothly. Okay. And this brings me to the conclusion. So to recap, my points are: first, XR really requires 6DoF content for comfortable and fully immersive experience. 3DoF reality captured content is not the right format for XR. The second point is that 6DoF content is hard to capture from reality, and this traditionally required using lots of synchronized cameras, such as in Volumetric Studio. However, the recent advancements in AI enable us to decrease the number of cameras rather dramatically and to go as far as capturing dynamic scenes in 6 degrees of freedom using smartphones. Yeah, thank you, and I'll be happy to answer questions.